And good morning again on this Memorial Day weekend. Former Secretary of State and former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Colin Powell, is with us in the studio this morning. Thank you, General. It's been quite a 2 weeks, as you know. It was on this broadcast that your old boss and colleague, Dick Cheney, accused this administration of putting the nation's security at risk. He finalized that argument in the speech last week, said he had no regrets about the the methods on dealing with terrorists that the administration took. He criticized the closing of Guantanamo. I'm going to ask you about all of that, but I want to start where he ended his interview here in Face the Nation when he said some things about you. Here's what he said. Rush Limbaugh said the other day that the party would probably be better off if Colin Powell left and just became a Democrat. Colin Powell said Republicans would be better off if they didn't have Rush Limbaugh out speaking for him. Where do you come down?
Well, if I had to choose in terms of being a Republican, I'd go with Rush Limbaugh, I think. My take on it was Colin had already left the party. I didn't know he was still a Republican.
You know, so you think that he's not a Republican?
I just noted he endorsed the Democratic candidate for president this time, Barack Obama. I assume that that's some indication of his loyalty and his interest.
And you said you'd take Rush Limbaugh over Colin Powell.
I would.
Well, there you have it, General. So I guess the first question, are you a Republican?
Let me answer it this way, if I may, Bob. Rush will not get his wish, and Mr. Cheney was misinformed. I am still a Republican. And I'd like to point out that in the course of my 50 years of voting for presidents, I have voted for the person I thought was best qualified at that time to lead the nation. Last year, I thought it was President now Barack Obama. For the previous 20 years, I voted solidly for Republican candidates. Voted for Ronald Reagan twice, George Bush 41 twice, George Bush 43 twice. I spent 8 years in Bush administrations. I served Ronald Reagan for 2 years. I spoke at the 1996 convention, and I spoke at the 2000 convention. What the concern about me is, well, is he too moderate? I have always felt that the Republican Party should be more inclusive than it generally has been over the years. And I believe we need a strong Republican Party that is not just anchored in the base, but has built on the base to include more individuals. And if we don't do that, if we don't reach out more, the party is going to be sitting on a very, very narrow base. And you can only do two things with a base. You can sit on it and watch the world go by, or you can build on the base. And I believe we should build on the base because the nation needs two parties debating each other. But what we have to do is debate and define who we are and what we are, and not just listen to diktats that come down from the right wing of the party.
Well, why do you think the former vice president said what he said?
Well, I assume that was his point of view, but he was misled if he thought I left the party. You know, neither he nor Rush Limbaugh are members of the membership committee of the Republican Party. I get to make my decision on that, and so I will continue to work in a way that I think is helpful to the country and helpful to the party. And there are good reasons for this. I mean, in the military, we have something called after-action reviews. After a battle or after a training exercise, you bring all the leaders in and you say, what's going right, what's going wrong, what do we do right or wrong, and how do we move forward? It's a no-holds-barred, candid discussion of where we are. That's what the Republican Party needs now. When you look at the results of the election last year, lost the presidency by 10 million votes, lost that campaign by 10 million votes. We saw both houses of Congress switch to the Democrats. We saw whole sections of the country move to the Democratic column. Virginia, my state, Democratic. Florida, Nevada, other places. We looked at all of the demographics of it. Gallup poll had a series of indicators, and in almost every demographic indicator, the Republican Party is losing. North, south, east, west, men, women, whites, blacks, Hispanics. And I think the Republican Party has to take a hard look at itself and decide, what kind of party are we? Are we simply moving further to the right, and by so doing, opening up the right of center and the center to be taken over by independents and to be taken over by Democrats? You look at the statistic in Pennsylvania that our inspector has cited. 200,000 Republicans in Pennsylvania switched their allegiance to become Democrats in the election of 2008. That kind of leakage cannot continue. if the Republican Party is going to play a major role in the life of our country. And if you look at the other statistic that is around these days, and that the number of people identifying themselves as Republicans has dropped significantly into the low 20s. And among those low 20s, they're not all conservatives. A lot of them are fairly moderate or right-of-center Republicans who are concerned about the right wing. And they're not that vocal about it, because if you are vocal, you're going to get your voicemail filled up, and you're going to get lots of emails like I do.
Well, what about Rush Limbaugh? A lot of people who are Republicans say, hey, people are taking him too seriously. He is just an entertainer. But he has been on your case for quite a while. When you announced you were voting for Barack Obama, he said the only reason he's doing that is because Barack Obama is black. Was he calling you a racist?
I don't know what he was doing by that, and I don't want to exchange insults with him. But I thought it was unfortunate. I laid out a very specific set of reasons as to why I was voting for Barack Obama. Mr. Limbaugh saw fit to dismiss all of those reasons and put it into a racial context, that the only reason I did it is I was black and I had never voted for a Democrat before. Well, yes, I have. I voted for John Kennedy. I voted for Lyndon Johnson. I even voted for Jimmy Carter. And I've always tried to vote for the best man. But he put it in that racial context, and I thought that was very unfortunate. What about the 69 million people who voted for Barack Obama? Did they all do it on the basis, why doesn't he sort of comment on those? But Mr. Limbaugh is entitled to his opinion, and I don't say he shouldn't have an opinion. The nature of our country is we ought to debate these things. But he shouldn't have a veto over what someone thinks. And he's an entertainer, he is a radio figure, and he is a significant one. But he's more than that. When the chairman of the RNC, Michael Steele, issues the mildest of criticisms concerning Mr. Limbaugh, and then 24 hours later, the chairman of the RNC has to lay prostrate on the floor, apologizing for it. And when two congressmen offer the mildest criticism of Mr. Limbaugh, they too, within 24 hours, have such pressure brought to bear on them that they have to change their view and apologize for criticizing him. Well, if he's out there, he should be subject to criticism, just as I am subject to criticism. Let's debate the future of the party, and let's let all segments of the party come in. You know, my model for the Republican Party is a great man we just lost, a man by the name of Jack Kemp. Jack was as conservative as anybody. We all know Jack. And Jack also was a man who believed in inclusiveness, reaching out to minorities, reaching out to the poor, sharing the wealth, which became a bad term last fall, but sharing the wealth of the country, not only with the rich, but with those who are least advantaged in our society. It's that kind of Jack Kemp republicanism that I like, and I would like to see the party move more in that kind of a direction. Let's
talk a little bit about Guantanamo. The vice president came out very hard against the Obama administration and its policies. He said it would be a mistake to close Guantanamo. Others have said it would actually pose a danger to this country if these people are brought back. Do you think Guantanamo should be closed, John?
Yes, I felt Guantanamo should be closed for the past 6 years, and I lobbied and presented reasons to President Bush. And Mr. Cheney is not only disagreeing with President Obama's policy, he's disagreeing with President Bush's policy. President Bush stated repeatedly to international audiences and to the country that he wanted to close Guantanamo. The problem he had was he couldn't get all the pieces together. Secretary Rice, Secretary of State Rice, and Secretary of Defense Gates had come forward with plans, but the plans ran into difficulties with the Department of Justice and others. So it is a complex problem, and President Bush wasn't able to close Guantanamo on his watch. And President Obama came in saying he would close Guantanamo, and he has run into some of those same sorts of problems. So I think we need to kind of take the heat out of this issue. I think President Obama didn't handle it very well by going up to the Congress and asking for $80 million without a plan, and by, frankly, giving enough time to opponents of it to marshal their forces as to why we shouldn't do this. But Guantanamo has caused us a great deal of trouble throughout the world. And Mr. Cheney the other day said, well, we're doing it to satisfy European intellectuals or something like that. No, we're doing it to reassure Europeans, Muslims, Arabs, all the people around the world that we are a nation of law. It isn't so much Guantanamo, it's the people at Guantanamo. How do we deal with them? We can't keep them locked up forever. This business is about making the country less safe by bringing these people to our prison system. We've got 2 million people in jail in America, the highest incarceration rate in the world. And they all had lawyers, they all had access to the writ of habeas corpus, and they're all in jail. And I don't know, Bob, if you've ever seen some of these prison reality shows on television where they show you what a super lockup is. I'm not terribly worried about one of these guys going to a super lockup and being kept locked up.
So you think they can be brought here
Yes.
and kept
Yes.
safely without posing
Yes,
any danger?
and I think that should have been done immediately and not start looking for $80 million to build prisons. Look, we're talking about roughly 240. The hardcore problem is that there are some of them that you really do not have cold evidence on that you could put before an Article III court. That's the problem that President Bush struggled with. It's the problem that President Obama is struggling with. We may have to find new legislation or have the Congress assist us with this, but let's get it into our system of laws with an executive and a legislative and a judicial branch all working it together.